I'm Kyle Malnati, your host of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. At Calibrate, we exist to help people create generational wealth through real estate. My personal mission is to encourage, empower, and educate you by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Best of Calibrate Real Estate Podcast 2020. Well, we've turned a new year. Father Time marches on again. We're into 2021. And I wrote on my Instagram towards the end of the year, and if you're following me on Instagram, thank you so much. I wrote on my Instagram, are you running away from 2020 or are you running into 2021? And I'm hopeful that the best of episodes will remind you that there were some highlights, there were some benefits, there were some blessings in 2020, and it wasn't all bad. So if you felt like 2020 was a bad year, I totally understand why. There's so many different things that could have been looked at as things lost, things that didn't turn out the way that you wanted. And that happened for me as well. There were plenty of things, plenty of deals that didn't work out, plenty of brokers that left our company, plenty of things that just broke your heart. Obviously, if you had anybody that dealt with health issues, if you had anybody that dealt with employment issues, if you had clients that were freaking out, wondering what they should do as it relates to their real estate, it was a really, really weird year. Let's put it that way. But obviously there were some blessings. I'd like to take this opportunity to recap our best of episodes. We're going to be going through episode 108, Rob Zaberski, followed by episode 112, Michaela, Durham, episode 143, Brendan Bartik, episode 146, Christy Leonard, and last but not least, episode 151, Mike Mikalowitz. All right, here we go. Rob Zaberski, Master Your Environment, the first of the best of. The reason I like Rob is the type of guy that is just really fun to listen to. And I just appreciate that Rob has this humor. So I hope that you'll hear that coming out. One of the things we decided to do in this particular segment of the best of episode is include our intro. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you is, as a podcast host, I am oftentimes trying to navigate the guest and make sure that we create good storyline. And this episode is really for you, the podcast listener, because it's the first time you and I really get to chat together. Obviously, you're normally a fly on the wall. You're normally listening in, but this is me communicating right to you. And one of the things I just personally felt as I was thinking back, and as a high achiever, these are some things that are important to observe. I really feel like I nailed this intro. I feel like when I was talking about Rob and sharing his introduction, it was one of the best. And so here you go, episode 108, Rob Zaberski, Master Your Environment. We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati. Our esteemed guest today is Rob Zaberski. Do not ask me how to spell that because I'm looking at it and it's still difficult for me to spell, but Rob Zaberski lives in Illinois, is one of the partners of Freedom Personal Development. His business partner, Roger, started it over 20 years ago, and Rob joined him about 10 years ago. What they do is they travel around the country helping people become a better version of themselves. I am holding in my hands a book that both Rob and his partner Roger wrote called Master Your Mind. I have loved reading it, and we're going to dive right into the content. Rob, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to interview you today, and let's get talking right away about this client, Mary, the top producing realtor. You wrote a chapter that resonated with me called Mastering Your Environment, and it's all about decluttering. Yep. I will tell you, the top producing realtor and all of our audience members, the funniest thing is the realtor's passenger seat isn't for people. It's for books and receipts and yesterday's lunch and the stuff you need to recycle and all these other things. So let's talk about decluttering and why we hold on to stuff and what you've learned working with someone like Mary and then others that are top performers, but they really need to declutter, and what that growth looks like on the other side of decluttering.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Mary's a dear friend of mine. We've actually gone to some retreats and some training together. So I've known her on a personal level, as well as professional level. And yeah, she's literally one of the top producers in the state of Wisconsin. She was the president of the Wisconsin Real Estate Association. I mean, she's held every post, right? And she's got 2 kids, and she's happily married, and like most people listening, and it was really fun. Like in the court, it was probably over a glass of wine or something. We were chatting. I'm like, Mary, what's like, how do you do this? Like I'm busy in what I do, and my front seat isn't as bad as yours, but like I got a lot going on. And it's funny. She's like, here's the deal. And I wrote about this. She goes, what's interesting is, yes, I'm blessed. I've got, Pete, her husband, is a wonderful support. He picks up a lot of slack at home so that she can focus on work. But, she gets into the groove, right? Or maybe it's the groove, maybe it's the rut. We'll talk about that later. But she's like, I go and go and go. And all of a sudden I look down and my desk is like Beirut in the 80s. Like it's destroyed. And every now and again, every couple months, I take a look at that, and it brings stress into my life. It's just like, it's a mess, and I can't operate like that. So I'll just, maybe it's a Saturday, I'll come in, I'll just take a couple hours and I'll just clear it out. Right. And I'll clean up my desk and organize. And this was my absolute favorite part of the conversation. And I would love to be able to like make this stuff up, but you can't. She's like, here's the craziest thing of all. She's like, I'm super dialed. My systems are dialed, my processes, my script, and all that back end stuff is dialed. She goes, every time I clean my desk, I find a couple $1,000s in business. It's like a lead that somebody I got introduced to months ago that they were due for a follow-up, and it fell, it literally got lost in this shuffle, or, closing statement, or there's something, or she's like, literally, sometimes I find checks. People wrote me a check. They owed me money from months ago, and I threw it on my desk. I literally find money in my mess. She's like, so I don't like, it's not like I go into my day going, all right, how are we going to make my desk messy today? She goes, but I know that it's just okay, because eventually I'm going to have a clean out day. And I know that every time I clean my desk, there's somewhere between a couple $100 and a couple $1,000 just waiting to be found.
Oh man, I love that, because every person that's listening is doing one of 3 things. They're either nodding in agreement, they're laughing their heads off, or they're grimacing a little bit because they're like, oh boy, he just poked me there. He just struck a nerve. And I would say every single one of us knows this, especially if you've produced something and amass something that all of a sudden you're like, I got all this important stuff. I don't want to lose it. Or I've got this deal that's really complicated. I need all these notes and all these things. So what my follow-up question would be, and I'm sure that you've developed this process, is what's the process for, one, knowing it's gotten out of hand, and 2, really giving yourself the permission to either throw things away or recycle things? And I remember a concept in the book, and this is something that really touched me, is that there's this concept of this really, really productive person that's amassing all of these articles and all of these books. And it starts to stress you as you've got this to-do list, this reading list. And as you look over my shoulder, there's a big bookshelf of books that I've read. And some of them I've got notes in and I enjoy and I read over and over again because they're just that evergreen, that timeless. But others, I'm like, I'm never really going to get to that one. And so if someone's really looking at decluttering because they've been productive and they want to either find the literal $1,000 check that they forgot to deposit, or the figurative lead that they just needed to dust off a little bit, how do you help someone start that process? Because I think it's kind of paralyzing just to even start.
For sure. And right, wrong, or indifferent, I'll be honest with you. More often than not, the impetus for getting started, it comes from an external source, right? It's the spouse going, honey, I would love to be able to use the dining room table. Or it's the team member that goes, hey, like, I can't even open the door. Or the kids that's like, hey, mom, can I sit in the front seat instead of the back seat? Because, like, you know what I mean? So, like, either like, if it's done internally, that's awesome. And maybe it's scheduled. I always recommend, have cleanup day, for the independent contractors that are out there. I know myself, and like, I've got accounting day. It's one of my least favorite days of the month, but it's the day that I set aside to go through and update QuickBooks. And I'm off topic, but I'm not. But you're like, one of the things you're talking about is like the I'll get to it pile, right? Oh yeah, I'll get it. I would joke to people, it usually sits back here, like right out of the periph, so you can't see it in your day to day. And then a lot of people get stuck. This is not my term, but I like using it. Like a lot of people spend so much time shoulding all over themselves. And I'm going to say that slowly to make sure that you understand that it is PG. It's shoulding all over themselves. Like, oh, I should be reading that. I should spend more time doing this. I should get to that. I should do this. And just be kind to yourself first and foremost, right? It's, if you've done a proper job, if you're clear on what you want, why it's important to you, if you've structured things like core values and purpose and vision, then you have you've got a great map or compass to be operating from. And that in of itself helps you stop shooting all over yourself. That being said, there's a tactical aspect to decluttering, and we actually teach, this is part of our, one of the programs we do is we call it reading smart. So it's all about how to read faster with higher comprehension. One of the ways to absorb or intake more information is to eliminate the clutter. And one of the analogies I use is, it's like, if anyone has like, I'm sure realtors never deal with like the unruly bushes, right? If anybody's got like the rose bush, like Jason Edwards, I know you just interviewed him recently, good friend of mine. He just did a weekly blog post talking about how they literally trim these rose bushes down to almost nothing, but they know that they have to do that in order for them to grow back fuller and more healthy. Same thing goes with your input sources. There's a lot of stuff that we feel like we should be reading or absorbing, and the reality is it's not going to hurt us if we don't.
And we're back. Wow. Rob Zaberski, make sure to get his book with Roger Seep. Make sure to benefit any of the authors that we have on our show by going out and buying their book. We definitely would appreciate that. Of course, it's a great time to remind you that this podcast doesn't grow if you're not sharing it. We definitely appreciate everybody that has rated, reviewed, subscribed, etc. Apple iTunes, Apple Podcasts is the area of focus that we are typically talking about, but we're also on Spotify, iHeartRadio. We're on YouTube, and YouTube's not an area that we focus on a ton, but if you want to download our podcast, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. Okay, next up, episode 112, Michaela Durham, the sales superpower of introverts. I love this because I'm married to an introvert. Some of the best people around me at Calibrate are introverts. So yeah, Courtney's an introvert, and she loved the title of this. And I just enjoyed that the discussion about sales could pass the normal idea of extroverts, people that are wide open and gregarious. Introverts, we're taking up for you here. So if you're an introvert and you're listening and you're raising your hand saying, yeah, we can do it too, here you go. So this is a really cool segment of episode 112 with Michaela Durham, sales superpower of introverts. I've just got to ask you, Michaela, because I think as a younger person, and I hate to focus on age, but both of us are under 40 and you're just knocking on the door of 30 if you're not right there already. But one of the things that happens is I think we oftentimes as younger people, sometimes we can hide our mistakes. Sometimes we can have this approach where, oh, if I don't know something, I'm going to fake it until I make it. And I think that a lot of people get bent out of shape when they make mistakes and they think that they're a failure when a plan doesn't go perfectly, or maybe it just goes a little bit differently than they thought. So how have you learned, because I think all successful people really stand on a mountain of failure. How have you learned how to handle and manage failure? Because I think that's a very important part of the journey as a real estate professional.
Yeah, I think that it gets easier and easier. The longer you're in this business, I think the first few times you feel like you failed someone, or your client or your friend chooses a different real estate agent, or a client of yours decides to go another direction, the failure hurts. And you have this on your notes, and it's been in a book that I've read too, that, the big difference between successful agents and not successful agents is how quick you can rebound. And I learned that early on, that you're going to have your ups and downs. And I had some great mentors in my office that kind of like walked me through the first few times you just get crushed by, an event like that or something that you messed up, which was helpful. But I think, yeah, it's all about how quick you can rebound in this business. And the longer you're in it, the less they hurt, and you kind of become numb to it. And it's just part of the everyday real estate, which is good and bad, I guess. Another part of it for me is I grew up in a pretty competitive background, pretty competitive like sports family. My dad's actually a college basketball coach. So we learned, very early on about, we always call it the PMA, which is your positive mental attitude. And then also we all kind of grew up with a competitive drive. So I think a lot of it for me too was just a personal competitiveness with myself of like, all right, it didn't work this year. I didn't quite, hit my goal or something like that. Then I have like a competitiveness in me next month to hit it or to do better or prove that person wrong. Kind of just on the inside, I think is part of what is what works for me.
I love that. Shout out to your dad. Let's talk about him. So what was it like growing up in a family with a college basketball coach, dad? And I'm assuming, I mean, I could just imagine all of the like affirmations and mental preparedness and, like you got game plans as little kids. And what's that like? I mean, that's got to be a very cool and fun atmosphere to grow up in. It's exciting to go see different things, different games, and just see how dad operates. But what was that like being raised by someone that obviously is focused on developing people into what they can become, which I think is every coach is got that focus.
Yeah, absolutely. You see a lot of successes and a lot of failures. So my dad coached at Montana State, which is in Bozeman. And yeah, it's a really, really fun way to grow up because you get to be in the middle of athletics, which, in our family was something we loved. And you get to kind of follow a team and be on the inside of, big things that are really important to the community. So that was a lot of fun. And at the same time, you learn hard work. I don't think that you are a college basketball coach or a college coach for the money ever. It's because it's your passion. So, I mean, he's for sure the hardest working person I know. So we learned that. I mean, he'd probably be disappointed with, the number of hours I put in the office compared to what he does. But we learned that really early on that, if you put in the hard work, you will get the return down the road. And then, it goes back to that kind of watching him bounce back after tough losses or losing to your rival, but then celebrating the wins too. Like one of my favorite stories is, I think it was, probably the end of February. And we played our rival, which was the University of Montana, and beat them, I think, in Missoula, which was just, a big deal. And it was basketball season, so our Christmas lights still weren't down. So we got home and turned on the Christmas lights at the end of February. And then the neighbors turned on theirs too. But you kind of celebrate the wins and then figure out how to get over the losses pretty quick in that kind of a environment.
Oh, I love that story. That's so fun. And I agree. I think as real estate professionals, one of the things we forget about is to celebrate success, especially if you're driven, you're an achiever, you're like, okay, on to the next one, on to the next one. And I've always felt that. And I had this period of my life where I had to pull that back and say, it's important to celebrate these victories. And I love that story about your dad winning, over University of Montana and turning the Christmas lights on, which I'm sure, you're in the thick of basketball season. That was a thing. I'm reminded of the Michael Jordan quote. A lot of people have heard this, but I'll say it. Michael Jordan said, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. And we're back. I appreciate how Michaela was so open about the thing that we all deal with on a regular basis, which is failure, things not going the way that we want. And I think it was so cool that she shared the story about her dad and what it was like growing up as the daughter of a collegiate basketball coach. Really cool stuff. Next up, we've got episode 143, Brendan Bartik. And I will say that this was one of the most popular downloaded episodes right when we released it. And what a title, $1 Million Daily Schedule for Brokers. Brendan's actually in Colorado. So it's neat that one of the 5 episodes was actually someone from my home state. Brendan is a powerhouse Keller Williams owner, operator, and broker. I'm excited to kind of discuss and have you re-listen to Brendan's militant schedule, militant mindset, if you will, as a veteran. And we'll be back here in just a moment. I think that systems are probably one of the hardest things for real estate agents to learn. And I know that the Keller Williams organization has really perfected this. I know that you also are a coach. And so not only are you living this, you're also helping others really get to the next level. So you'd shared with me, and I'd love to share with our audience, your $1 Million Daily Schedule for agents, really creating that regimen. And what is that presentation like? How do you walk people through this $1 Million Daily Schedule for agents?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Kyle, so the $1 Million Schedule starts with a program that we developed called Mastery. So Mastery. And that starts with waking up early. So I wake up every day at 4:30 a.m. I know that's not for everybody. We have people that, basically the goal is between 4:30 and 6, right? If you're waking up after 6 o'clock, then it's very difficult in this universe to be ultra successful, in my opinion, because there's too much that we need to develop and work on to get done. So every morning routine starts out the same way for a millionaire agent, and it starts with mastery. So M stands for meditation. So every morning, 10 minutes of meditation. The A is for affirmations. So 5 minutes of affirmations. Today I'll take my next listing. Today I'll have my next closing. Today I'll make my next $1 million client. Today I'm the #1 agent in my office, my city. And you just go through that for 5 minutes every single morning in a very quiet place in your home or your apartment or wherever you're at. The next is the S. So 5 minutes of script review. Now this is the big one, right? This is the big one, especially for us as real estate agents, where I need to review the scripts and dialogues that I'm going to need that day for my lead gen session. If I'm going to have a conversation with a client about possibly improving the price of their home because it's not selling at the current price. If I can review that script, how much easier is it going to be for me and the client later that day, right? Then you've got the T. So this was a game changer. 2 thank you cards every day to clients, your staff, your family. So think about it. I'm cranking out 2 a day. I'm putting out almost close to 600 personalized thank you notes every single year, right? Weekends, sometimes I take a day off here and there and all that, but it's like Santa's workshop. We're just cranking in the background, and it makes it a major impact on people. They love getting that. Hey, I was just thinking about you, Kyle. Hope you're doing well. Wanted to just check in. It's a game changer. So you've got 2 thank you cards. Then you have the E for exercise, right? So 20 minutes of exercise. I get up a little bit earlier because I need an hour because I need an hour, but 20 minutes the minimum, whether it's just jumping jacks or whatever it is. Then the R is reading. So 10 minutes of reading, whether that's an Audible book, whether that's, whatever, a book that you're reading. And then the last one, this is the one that trips everybody out the most, 10-minute YouTube video. So the Y stands for YouTube. And I started doing this about 2 years ago, where I really started every morning. I made a decision to do a 10-minute YouTube video, and I would just ask YouTube how to, and then finish that question, right? How to improve my listing presentation, how to improve my customer experience, how to improve my, it's all out there, right? Like it's all on YouTube. And there's a lot of garbage, don't let me get you wrong, but there's a lot of good stuff. So we start out with that. Then 7:30, I'm at the office.
We're back. Wasn't Brendan great? I love his morning schedule, the Mastery, Mastery, meditation, affirmations, script review, 2 thank yous, exercise, reading, YouTube. That is just incredible. Make sure that you tune into the full episode to hear the rest of the schedule for $1 Million Agents. That's something that's important about any of these episodes. If you like the segment, obviously go back, dial back that episode. Okay, around the corner, around the bend here, we have episode 146 in chronological order here. Christy Leonard. Christy is actually a friend, someone that I have had the benefit. We've had 2 30 under 30s on our best of. Michaela Durham was the first, Christy Leonard the second, and I've had a chance to meet both of them in person. It's so fun to have the podcast where we can do this on Zoom, we can do it digitally, but then also to have met a lot of these people in person is a real wonderful thing for a host. It just makes for better podcast interviews. Bold Generosity is the title of Christy's episode 146. Enjoy. We'll be right back. Someone that's been successful like you, Christy, you have, it's been written multiple times here that I've seen that you are very charitable, and you actually donate at least 20% of your gross commission income to charities, to faith-based organizations. And that's incredible. I mean, I'm a man of faith, and I feel like I'm very charitable, feel like I'm very generous, but I'm not doing 20%. Where did that come from? How did you decide that that was going to be something that you were going to do? And most importantly, why are you doing that?
Yes. So where it kind of came from is that we believe that 10% is the tithe. So that is something that's like a non-negotiable. It's the tithe. We do it regardless of what the income is. And so then we wanted an offering. And so we wanted to match that tithe with a 10% offering. And so that is kind of where the 20% came from. We have been givers from the beginning. I mean, when my church kind of expanded, they bought a property, they bought some land. And so we wanted to buy some acreage. We had the opportunity to sow into that. And it just kind of kept on snowballing forward. And for me, it was just a matter of, you can't outgive God. You don't give God because you expect something back. But it's like, there's no amount that you could ever do to repay for all that he has done, all of his goodness. And so I know that everything that I have comes from God. I have people ask me all the time, how do you get your business? Where do you get your leads from? And they almost see it, it almost seems like I'm hiding something because I'm like, God, but it's true. It's like, I mean, it's not, maybe I get a few from Zillow, a few from, it's like, those aren't really my sources. It's really unexplainable how my business has grown. I mean, this year it's been my best year yet. It's been overflowing. I actually told my mom, and I were joking, and I was like, God, can we like slow down the floodgates? And my mom was like, don't say that. But it was funny because it's like, it's just been like so overflowing in abundance. And so for me, I know that that's from God. And I know that if I ever get my eyes off of that and start thinking that Christy is doing all this and get prideful, that could stop tomorrow. I just, 100% everything that I have is coming from God. And it's what also keeps me going, because you do start to feel burnout. I mean, I've been doing this 13 years, and I've been doing, holding a lot, there's a lot of people that do a lot less than me and have several assistants. So I've been doing a lot of work for a long period of time, trying to do it on my own because I micromanage too much. But that is what keeps me going. Is it's like, one of my favorite organizations is the A21 campaign. And I literally I could be saving someone from slavery right now, by my funds, by my ability to donate. I could be, helping someone, their life is saved because I'm sewing into a ministry and that person preached a message. I don't feel like for me that my gift is hands-on. I've tried, volunteering at the church and the children's ministry and things like that. I feel like the gift that God gave me was the ability to make the income to be able to help they need sowers, they need that seed. And so that's kind of where I feel like my ability was, and it's what drives me. We actually didn't mention this before, but back early on in my real estate career, I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I just want to do a Solomon offering. And so I gave like half of what I had in my retirement away because I just wanted to show God, like, I'm not relying on this. I'm relying on you. You are my source. You are my provider. And that's how I kind of feel at the end of the day. It's just, I could do that all over again. That what I have, I've given more than what I have in savings or any sort of retirement or anything like that, because I just feel like God is the provider and God is the source, and that's where my hope is.
That's amazing. It's difficult for me to find words to share after everything that's just wonderful that you've shared, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try here. Okay. So, a few things that I've picked up along the way that in the Old Testament, Abraham, which is a pivotal character, Abraham was blessed to be a blessing and built many amazing things because God's kingdom needed to grow. And all of it was a reflection of how wonderful God was, not how wonderful Abraham was. And I think I hear a lot of that in what you're saying. More current, and I think for people who are not of the Jewish or Christian faith may hear a lot of what we're saying and just say, what's a tithe? What's an offering? There's a difference between the two. I thought they're the same. And so just real quick, a tithe literally means a tenth of your income. And then anything stacked above and beyond a tithe is called an offering. And the biblical old-fashioned storehouse was you'd have these big silos, and they would say give a tithe, give a tenth of your first fruits. Before you use anything on your own, you give 10% to the church, and that's going to bless the rest of the community. And I think you're right. I think that there are different vocations. There's different roles that people of the community of God share. Some are incredible servants, but they may not have the income making ability that you have. And one of the difficult things that I think a lot of people get caught up in is that I've got to serve, I've got to be the hands and feet of God, I've got to be the hands and feet of Christ. And there's truth to that. But if there's no money behind it, it'll fall short. There can be all the volunteers in the world, but if someone's not buying the bottles of water, if someone's not buying the well that's going to be created in Africa, if someone, Bill Gates doesn't sit back and say, okay, I'm going to solve this global issue here, and I'm going to put scientific research behind it, I'm going to put money behind it, none of it happens. So a more recent non-biblical example of tithing that I want to share is that John D. Rockefeller, one of the titans of industry in the Industrial Revolution here in America, shared, I would have never been able to tithe the first $1 million I ever made. So at that time, over 100 years ago, Rockefeller saying I would never have been able to donate $100,000 on that $1 million if I had not tithed my first salary, which was $1.50 per week. Isn't that incredible? It starts with the 15 cents of tithe that he's going to do per week on that $1.50 per week salary, that then he makes $1 million and gets recognized for giving away $100,000. But it starts out small. It starts out with those first couple of deals that you do, and then it just builds, doesn't it, Christy?
Yes, definitely. I was just gonna say, for us, thankfully, it's just been one of those things that it's like, it's not a struggle at all. It's like one of those things that it just we happily give, and it's just, I feel like that's just something that has been maybe a gift put in us, that's just we enjoy to be able to do that.
And we're back. I appreciate Christy's approach to business. I think that we should all have a heart of giving, a heart of sharing, a heart that wants to benefit others and make the world a better place. That's something that my grandfather, who's still alive today and survived COVID in his late 90s out in McLean, Virginia, he always reminded our family that you really need to leave the world a better place, leave things better than you found them. If you borrow something from someone, and they should be bringing that back to you, nice and clean. I think of I borrow a lawnmower every now and again. We normally have a lawn service, but there's always that one lawn mow of the end of the year or the beginning of the year where things are getting a little bit shaggy and the service is all done for. And I'll borrow a neighbor's lawnmower, and you wash it off. You make sure you fill it up with gas. You make sure you give it back to your neighbor better than it was given to you. And so that's something that I was reminded of in Christy Leonard's bold generosity, is just making the world a better place. And God loves a cheerful giver. That's scripture, but God loves a cheerful giver. And so that's the big key too, is that it's not just give to get. It's not just give because you think you have to give back, but it's give because you've been blessed and you should be cheerful in your giving. And that's something that's going to be between you and God and you and your maker. And those are, you should never feel bad about what you're giving, and you always know that you can give more. All right. Last but not least, one of our most popular guests, one of our most notable guests, 6-time author, Mike Mikalowitz. We were talking about his brand new book, Fix This Next, which is actually just behind the scenes for Calibrate Real Estate, the boutique brokerage. We are implementing Fix This Next in 2021 throughout our entire organization. We had a lot of different things go well last year, and we had some things that we know we need to work on. We're in a rebuilding phase here at Calibrate, and I'm not too shy to say that. I'm not too proud to admit that we have some things that we've got to work on here within our brokerage. And so listen to Mike Mikalowitz as he tells us how to fix this next and what, and most importantly, to fix next. All entrepreneurs face the same problems. And the question that we're going to answer together here with Fix This Next, which is over my shoulder, and we're going to do an awesome giveaway for your new book, Fix This Next. The question that we're going to answer is, which problem do we tackle first? Right. And some context around that, Mike, is that this week actually marks the 4-year anniversary of me opening Calibrate Real Estate, a boutique brokerage firm. And it was funny, I was kind of waxing nostalgic, looking through my iPhone at photos from 4 years ago, and moving day. And I remember reading this in Fix This Next. Moving day for me, out of the team that I was working with at a boutique brokerage firm, when I was moving out to take care of our first startup office space and get that all ready, there was so much vision, so much promise. And, you know, the problem was, as I continued to wax nostalgic, I got to about a month later, and all of a sudden I saw the big white paper on the wall, you know, those big Post-it notes that everybody uses now. They used to be easels. Now you stick them up on the board, you write notes. We were doing a quarterly strategic priorities exercise, and I definitely suggest everybody do that. I learned it from EntreLeadership. I was actually in EntreLeadership All Access, and I know you were interviewed on their podcast by Ken Coleman.
Yeah.
And they had this great exercise. They called it the 4 insights. Basically, you answer what's working, what's broken, what's missing, and what's confusing. And I remember in that moment, a month after we opened up, I took a photo of it because my whole team, we were all doing this together. And I took a photo of it, sent it to my wife, who's co-owner in our business. And I remember feeling really, really overwhelmed. And I said, how can I ever get all of this done? And I think the pronoun was one of the bigger issues, the I. But just again, to ask that question, all entrepreneurs, we face the same problems. How do we know which problem to fix next, Mike?
Yeah, that became the thesis of Fix This Next, was that the biggest challenge entrepreneurs face is knowing what their biggest challenge is. So what I present in the book is the business hierarchy of needs. It's similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's a human need structure. Like, you and I need basic physiological elements of our life satisfied before anything else can be considered. Like, we need to breathe air, drink water, eat food. Without those elements, we die. So those are the priority. But once they're satisfied, then Maslow argues we have safety needs, shelter from weather and so forth. Then ultimately there's belonging, community, highest level self-actualization. Maslow argued at any time, if a base level need is compromised, we must resolve it before we can escalate back up. Well, the business hierarchy of needs is a very similar structure. Just like the human entity, the business is an entity. Now, there's one significant differentiator. We are wired into ourselves. I know when I'm hungry. We are not wired into our business. We actually don't know when our business is hungry. We say we do. My gut says we need to run more Facebook ads. But we really need to look at this empirically to back our questions with data. So the 5 levels of needs in business, foundationally, every business needs sales. That's the creation of cash. So we need to have that cash flowing in. Kind of like oxygen for Maslow's hierarchy, you need to breathe air. But once that's adequately satisfied, then we focus on profit. Profit is the absorption of that oxygen into a bloodstream. It's the muscle behind a business. It gives it longevity and stability. A lot of business owners already get confused at this 2 level. We think we can sell our way out of everything, which is like saying, oh, if I simply hyperventilate, I'll be stronger. No, these have to work in conjunction with each other. So it goes sales, profit. The next level above that's order. Order is creation of efficiency through the organization, where there's no dependency on the owner, ultimately no dependency on any individual. It can run without. And then impact, This is where our business is not focused on the transactions as much as transformation, being of great service to our clients, but systemically, where person after person is affected, not the one-offs. And the highest level in the business hierarchy of needs is legacy, the creation of permanence. This is where our business is of service for generations. It's not owned necessarily by generations, but it's designed specifically to have impact on the world into perpetuity. It's somewhere within this level that we have needs. The question is, of all these, what's the weakest spot? So just a quick analogy, if you and I, Kyle, had a chain between us and we're pulling it, that chain will snap at some spot. It'll always snap though at the same spot, which is the weakest link. Most business owners are trying to fix all the links, right? I'm trying to fix everything. We're focusing on all the links, but if we don't address the weakest link, it continues to snap just as easily. And that's why we have that frustration. I'm fixing everything, but it's not working. It's because we haven't identified the weakest link. So we use the business hierarchy of needs to pinpoint where the weakest link is currently, concentrate our energy on resolving that. Then by fixing just one link, the entire chain gets strengthened, and then we look for the next weakest link, improve that, and so on.
And we're back. Wow. 5 amazing episodes to recap 2020. If you're kind of wondering how we go through this, it's difficult because we want to have a good, well-rounded group of guests. We don't want to have all males. We don't want to have all females. We want it to be a diverse group as best we can. We also don't want it to be all episodes that were at the beginning of the year. So what we try to do is we obviously take our most downloaded episodes of the year, and the ones at the beginning of the year have a little bit better shot of that than the ones towards the end of the year. But we also look at what gets most downloaded the first and second week. If you have an episode that you felt like, gosh, this was supposed to be in the best of, I would have wanted it in the best of, send us an email, info@calibrate.re.com. Tell us why you loved the episode that you did, and we'll send you a book. We've got a couple of books that we bought from authors this past year that we can give away. You just send us an email, info@calibrate.re, and we will go ahead and send you a book as a way of saying thanks for commenting on what your favorite episode was for 2020. Before we jump into 2021, I've got to tell you about an important baton passing. Kayla Davis has been our podcast producer for the entire duration of this show, and she has been promoted. It's not to say that being podcast producer isn't a big job. It certainly is, but I needed to add more layers of leadership in the company in 2020. It was a year that really challenged me. It tested my mettle, as they would say, and Kayla's been promoted to managing broker, which is one step from the employing broker, which is my role at Calibrate Real Estate, the boutique brokerage firm. So we just want to say thank you to Kayla for all of her efforts. Over 155 episodes Kayla has been a part of and producing. And we want to say welcome to Ann Russell. Ann Russell is our new podcast producer and our marketing director at Calibrate Real Estate. A real special distinction. Ann was actually introduced to us by a client. Before we hired her, she was introduced to us because real estate's a repeat and referral business. We all know that. And her parents are clients of mine. I actually helped Ann's parents buy a house in 2017. And as we were putting out a all points bulletin job description that we were hiring, we got an email from Ann's stepmom saying, "Hey, my daughter just moved back here to Colorado, or just moved to Colorado, and is looking for a new start, looking for a new career in a field." And we've just loved working with Ann over the past year and a half almost. Ann is a rising star within our company, and Kayla Davis and I can't think of anybody better to take the baton and run with it and grow this podcast in tremendous ways. So for all of our guests of 2021, for Kayla Davis, our former podcast producer, for Ann Russell, our current podcast producer, I'm your gracious host, Kyle Malnati, and we all love to say that we'll see you around the neighborhood. This was the best of 2020 Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. Thanks everybody for tuning in.